When it comes to gunpla, there's always been such a power and mystery to the two words perfect grade. This line of Gundam kits has always been essentially the pinnacle of collectible gunpla. They're big, they're detailed, they look absolutely stellar up on a shelf, and most of the time, at least when they came out, they provided the ultimate building experience. Today I'm going to be taking a look at the perfect grade Gundam Astray red frame, which of course is from Gundam Seed Astray, and that does mean we're going back in time about 15 years because this was made in 2009. So just a little bit of a spoiler for the review in general. The build of this was okay, not too bad, a little dull in some sections, but the overall finished kit has such majesty and power and the glory that only the red frame has. So overall, definitely totally worth it. I got mine through Hobby Link Japan. It's kind of hard to know when and if these are going to be re-released and whatnot, but I will throw a link down there in the description for you to browse around yourself and keep an eye in that perfect grade section. But anyway, let's get into the review. So straight away, this right here is exactly what this kit looks like put together with a tiny little bit of extra effort. But essentially this is what you're going to get out of the box straight built with a little bit of lining. That is it. There really is just something so special about the red frame. It's just so awesomely cool, and it's got an absolutely giant katana, so where can you go wrong? But yeah, before we actually take a look at what this looks like and go through all of this stuff, let's wind back a little bit to one of the most important aspects of a Gundam kit, the build. As you'd expect with a perfect grade Gundam kit, it does come in an absolutely massive box and will take quite some time to put together. Now I just did this fairly quickly, 2 snips, no real sanding at all, and still took me quite a while to build, a few days if I'm not mistaken. If you do want to see what does come inside the box, all the individual bits of plastic, I did do an unboxing video so you can check that out. But when it actually comes to the build itself, when it comes to perfect grade kits, it's quite a simple and effective build. First off, this is heavily based on the perfect grade Strike Gundam, which is a very good perfect grade. It's old school, it's simple, but it does pretty much everything right. My favorite version of that one, just in case you want to know, is the more recently released perfect grade Perfect Strike Gundam. Again, if you want to see a review of that, you can check that out, but it's such a nice, simple, perfect grade kit, but what you get in the end is one of the best perfect grade displays around. It is huge. But yeah, at the core of this kit, it is heavily based on that particular perfect grade kit, so it does feel in some parts like a bit of a retrofit. When it comes to the interesting aspects about this particular build, first off, we do have 3 metal parts included in here. That is for the knees and the hips, basically to support those joints. With the ones in the knees, they just kind of go inside of the plastic parts. They're hidden away, you cannot see them, but they just add that structural integrity. In the hip, it's these dropping, swinging little segments. They're the actual hip joints, which in most kits tend to break sometimes, but not when they're made out of die-cast metal, again painted in a nice shade of red. Besides the knees and the hips, I didn't really record much else about the actual building of the legs and waist unit. It is pretty much, like I said, what we would have seen in the Strike, just with a bit of a red frame veneer, and in the end they are very nice, and the legs take a long time to build. Moving up to the torso, and we do have a nice cockpit inside of this. Now, I don't recall if this is exactly the same as what's in the Strike or not, but it does work out quite nicely. You've got your low figure inside of it. This time I didn't paint it, sadly. It does sit into its seat with a little bit of an opening section on front of it, and it does have a nice slide out and in mechanism that the hatch doors all build up on top of. It's definitely an extremely nice cockpit hatch. The rest of the torso builds up in this in the usual kind of way. We do have some old school additions to this kit that I kind of miss from older kits, mainly the chromed out piston sections. You don't really see those so much in newer kits. Actually, I just leaned on in there to take a look at the perfect grade Unleashed, which is the most recent perfect grade, and that totally has chromed out pistons in its neck. So we still do get those nowadays. I guess I just kind of feel like we're not seeing that sort of stuff as often anymore. But while we're on that topic, I'm going to mention that this kit has one of my kind of least favorite things older kits have, and that is the fact that you can actually put the wrong pieces in the wrong places. Now, nowadays with more modern kits, no piece fits where it shouldn't fit. They never do. All the little attachment points are all different. They change them so nothing is, well, stickable into where it's not meant to be stuck, but that is not the case with older kits. So I did fuck up at one point here by actually putting the wrong little polycap for the pistons into the torso. So it was I had to take it all apart all over again to put the right piece in. So make sure you're putting the right pieces where they're meant to go, because unlike new kits, you can actually stick them in the wrong places at times. When it comes to this build, the most complex aspects are definitely the limbs, the legs and the arms, and the fact that you have to build 2 of them means it does take quite a bit of time. 2 arms, that is, and 2 legs. They build up as a bunch of individual yet very detailed elements, and then you attach them all together in the end. The hands on this kit I absolutely love, for the main reason that when it comes to the design of the red frame Astray, it does have fingers that are white, red, white when it comes to the actual parts of the digits, which is a cool look. Across the other grades, high grade, real grade, master grade, you don't get this, you would have to paint that in. These are those old school perfect grade hands. They come on the runners like what you're seeing right here. You just cut them out, realign all the figures, you've got full articulation, and these do feel pretty good right now, and they look insanely nice too. Again, these are pretty much a hangover from the Strike kit, which I never had any issues with its hands. It also means that on this runner you've got a bunch of parts for the Strike that you don't actually use, and the one that kind of shocked me the most, and I'm kind of jumping forward in time a little bit here, is the fact that the eyes on the Strike were on this kind of runner which has injected in multiple colors of plastic into it. So the eyes that are left over from the Strike are actually molded in a nice red plastic and a clear in the eyes. The actual eyes we get for this kit, which is a brand new head entirely, are just pretty much high grade style, one piece clear with a sticker for over them, which at first seems really not premium, but when you actually put it all together, the eyes are so recessed, you'll never notice. And speaking of other elements, they're a little bit on the kind of shockingly simple side. The shoulders are too. Now, there really isn't much to the shoulders on the Astray, so they are as simple as they really need to be. But there are no real gimmicks in here breaking them up, there's no moving parts to the armor, it's really just, I think like 5 pieces per shoulder. They're extremely, extremely simple. They do look cool when they're finished, they just don't really do anything. But yeah, back to the head. Besides the eyes being incredibly simple, yet, like I said, when you finish the head you won't really notice too much, the rest of it builds up fairly simply, but at the same time quite effectively, which seems to be, in general, the core of this perfect grade. Finally, we do have an LED unit you have to build up yourself inside of this. It slides into the back of the head, it does take a button battery, and as usual, when it comes to me and my absolute terrible planning, I don't have any button batteries anywhere, so you're just gonna have to imagine in what the lights look like. Part of me does kind of prefer the fact that more modern perfect grade kits just take AA's. But yeah, after you spend your hours upon hours building this kit and you straight build it, this is exactly what you will get. So this is just 2 snips off the runner. I haven't cleaned up anything besides that, and overall it comes out quite well. This is one big, beautiful kit. And there's always something just so striking and mesmerizing about the overall look of the red frame. It's so unique and so perfect. Now, we'll mention out of box it is a little bit plain in some areas, especially on the white armor. A lot of the detail is just kind of molded into it and not really separated out or really any attention brought to it. So that does mean if you want to get the most out of it, it's best to panel line it. So this right here is what this kit looks like just out of box built, and here on the right, this is what it looks like after adding on some, barely any honestly, of the stickers and some panel lining. Now I will mention, I'm not going to get into it too much, but if you're going to panel line this kit, I use the kind of free flowing inky panel liners. Do not use these on any of the darker red because that is ABS plastic and it will damage them. Also, when it does come to the stickers in here, they're very old school as well. So some don't look too great, but overall it still works out quite well, and in the end, it's an absolutely gorgeous kit. Let's take a closer look. But anyway, finally, there we go. That is the perfect grade Gundam Astray red frame in all of its glory, and it is absolutely fantastic looking. Sure, it may be a little bit on the old school kind of side, but overall, it still looks impressive as hell when finished and given a little bit of panel lining. If you went a little bit further and detailed up some aspects of it as well, you would get it looking even better. Of course, the ultimate would be to get it fully painted up, if that's what you like. Me personally, I always prefer the kits to just kind of look like what they look like out of box. Just giving that detail a little bit of a helping hand to pop. So yeah, even though throughout the build I did find a lot of aspects did feel a little bit old school, there are definitely some aspects which are old school. Everything kind of came together to be better than the sum of its parts, and I think it's just that overall powerful Gundam Astray look that just makes this look incredible out of box. The angles look stupendous. we've detailed where we need it, we've got some clear parts here and there, and we've got that absolutely undeniably badass Gundam Astray stare with that killer looking head. On top of that, we do have fully posable hands, so if you get them into a nice pose, it will really add a lot of nice dynamic flair to a fairly nice looking kit. And I'm just talking about it right now, just standing there. So at this point, I'm going to throw it into a few different lights just so you can kind of get a good feel of what this does look like complete. We do have 2 shades of red in here, which may not be very obvious under some lights, it might be obvious under some others. Same with the stickers, these do have a little bit of an edge on them. I only use the ones that do pop onto the white sections, the rest are those kind of rub-on decals that don't have an edge. Overall though, it does look extremely nice. Personally, I would almost even say there are some perfect grades that have come out after this kit right here that still don't have the punch and the impact this kit has. Again, it's just something about the magic and the majesty of the red frame. So now throwing it down side by side with the actual art, and this to me feels like it might be the only version of this particular mobile suit that actually has the chunk that that art does bring. Now I will mention, when you do see this throughout the different arts, the little anime piece that they made, it does kind of change every now and then, but I like that kind of chunky look. Now I will mention, this does look more chunky than what you're seeing right now in person than it does on video. Now I'm going to switch to a more zoomed in kind of look so you can see what lenses kind of actually do. The zoomed out lens does make it a little skinnier than it actually is, and this tends to be an issue sometimes when filming bigger kits, but I will tell you, this is 100% chunky. When it comes to the color separation on this, it's okay, it's not fantastic, it's not like something you would see nowadays. When it comes to the colors on here, it's just one shade, except for the red. It's one shade of the, not black, it's actually a very dark gray, one shade of translucent green, one shade of white, one shade of the light gray, and like I mentioned, there is 2 shades of red. The shades in here being a darker red, which is the ABS of mainly the moving parts like the joints, and then we've got the red non-moving sections, which is in, as far as I know, a polystyrene in a slightly lighter shade of color. As for anything like textures or finishes, this is all in a kind of almost semi-matte, besides the clear sections in the head and on the sides of the legs, which are in a kind of subdued green, not the usual poppin' green we'd normally see. It's a very light, almost limeish green. When it comes to the detailing on here, it is extremely nice in the red sections, but the legs and the arms are divided up into tons and tons of individual parts. Under the armor, we do have some nice detailing too. Of course, it is all molded in the one color, but overall, it does look incredible. When it comes to the armor on the outside, it is a little bit on the plain side. This is anime and design accurate, but sometimes when it comes to perfect grades, we want to see a little bit more, so it does feel a little bit plain. And one funny thing about the Astray, most of the detail and the detailing is around back. So when it does come to unique aspects in the detailing, there really isn't a whole lot besides the green clear parts. So that is in the eyes, the head, and I will also mention that you can use the LED unit inside of this if you've got a battery for it. I don't right now, so I can't actually show what it's like. So the eyes do light up, and we do have some light piping in the head as well. But besides that, there really isn't much when it comes to interesting aspects in the details. So when it comes to the bad aspects of mobile suits, that of course being nub marks, mold lines, and seam lines, this is a pre-2010 kit, so it does have these in quite an abundance. Nub marks, all the cutty parts are on the surfaces, some are hidden by overlapping layers, but you do have some that you will see after the build. When it comes to seam lines, there are some here and there, mainly they're kind of adapted into the armor, so those aren't so bad, but mold lines I did notice quite a few while I was actually putting this together, especially on a lot of the parts like the housing aspects of the pistons, and a lot of parts that are molded in one piece. They have a fairly big line running down them. So when it does come to the stickers and decals, there is some stuff inside of this box, but for the most part, I do find they are quite disappointing. First off, we do have these right here. Now, these are just sticker-style decals. They're legit, straight-up stickers. So when you do actually stick these on, it is simple enough to do. However, these do tend to have notoriously bad kind of borders around them. Now, when you actually attach these onto white sections, they're not so bad, and they are nice designs like these ones up here in the shoulder, and this one right here on the side of the leg. Now, you can kind of see the sticker, especially where it's kind of folding right here because of the way it lays down, but overall, they're not too bad. Now, getting this actually laid on these 3 different sections, it's 3 parts. of the same sticker can be a little difficult. I just threw them on basically. So this middle one here could be a little bit better, but they don't line up perfectly. However, if you do want to know how to actually get this done, I have a video called, I think it's Cheap and Simple Gunpla Hacks. It's an old video, but everything in there stands up perfectly. Now, in order to attach these on, you can get yourself a little spray bottle, put a little bit of detergent into it. You can spray the surface, put these stickers down, then line them up almost like water slide decals, and they will stay stuck on permanently. I had my doubts about how this would work, but I still have this kit right here, the XS Gundam, and those stickers are still on it. I don't know, what, 8 years later? However, these do have a massive downside. Again, not too bad on white plastic, but any other color, and these will look abysmal. Just look at that. That's the cheapest looking thing. Nothing perfect grade about that whatsoever. So there's nothing you can really do about that. It just kind of works weird with the light and stands out so badly. That is awful looking. I usually don't use these, but I threw it on for example. Whoa, you don't want any of that. The next set of stickers we have in here are these. Now, these are hotly debated as to whether they're good or bad. These are discontinued. They don't really use these anymore. Even though this is a reissue kit, they did actually include them, which is pretty cool. But these are kind of odd. You just kind of cut them out and then you just literally rub them off the plastic onto the surface. Now, some people do find these hard to apply. Some people stick them on with some masking tape and then draw it on kind of with a pencil to use that to apply pressure. I literally just hold them onto the surface and rub them with my nail. It just works so easily that way. I've got full control and things work out nicely. These are my favorite decals to apply. They're quite delicate when on there, so I do recommend top coat, but these look great. They nearly have no border. They're matte, flat, and I mean, like, even a water slide has a bit of a border. These do not, and they adhere perfect if you get it right, which tends to be, you know, a relative difficulty, really. I find them easy. These are also in a nice pristine white, which is really nice. Sadly, I didn't get to use a whole lot of them, but the ones that I did use looked pretty damn good. Lastly, then we have these. Now, these are not a sticker style decal, but these are little rubber stickers. And if I don't mention them now, I'll totally forget. When I first saw these, I thought they were the daftest thing ever. So they stick onto the very bottom of the feet just like this. They're tiny little rubber pads that give it a little bit of traction when it's standing on stuff. And these work ridiculously well. Now, this turntable here I use sometimes. It's a large turntable but can wiggle the figures and model kits a little bit. Well, it's mirrored, so it's got a glass surface. A lot of kits will kind of slip and slide on this. I've got a glass desk too. But with these, I mean, these hold so well. I'm shaking the entire desk trying to move this kit. I really feel this should be a standard for Gunpla, or at least be included or available separately as an option, because they just really keep something standing there absolutely perfect, rock solid. They give it a little bit of bounce protection too, so they don't vibrate as much if something's moving them like this. Overall, so cool. Also a holdover from the Strike Perfect Grade, which is a good kit too. So when it does come to the standard lines of Gunpla, Perfect Grade is essentially the biggest, without going into the odder kind of grades. This stands at about 12.6 inches, which is in around 32 centimeters tall. As far as mobile suits go in the various Gundam universes, the Astray is a little short, if not about average size. So there it is side by side with two standard RX-78-2s, or should I say two standard Gundams being the RX-78-2. We've got the old school Perfect Grade on the left, and the brand new, well, it's probably not brand new anymore, but the newer Perfect Grade Unleashed over on the right. So it's in around the same sort of size. And just in case you don't have a Perfect Grade on hand for your own kind of size reference, there it is side by side with a high grade Gundam, as well as a standard Master Grade. So as you can see, they're very nice big model kits without getting too big. And almost pivoting a full 180 there is a few of these that are a little too big, or should I say poorly stored, for me to actually pull out and put beside this particular kit for a size comparison. So I'll just go to them. First up, this is the Perfect Grade Exia Gundam, a little bit smaller than this right here, but it has a whole stand and a whole bunch of lights inside of it that requires batteries. I don't have any batteries. Flying on to the other side of the office, which is a little bit on the inaccessible side. This needs some serious rejiggering in order to actually use it for filming. But yeah, up here we've got the updated version of the Perfect Grade Strike Gundam, which this is based on. And then moving on over to this side right here, and you can see I've got a couple more up on the shelf. Again, not really that accessible, well, it's a bit behind some stuff. But anyway, there it is beside the Gundam 00 Perfect Grade, the 7-sword version. So yeah, the Perfect Grade Gundam 00 7-sword, the perfectibility version of the Perfect Grade Unicorn, and the standard Perfect Grade Unicorn unicorn in at the back as well. Once again, I really need to completely change how this is all laid out in order to make sure that it's easier to film this in future, but it gives you a good idea of what size it is compared to the others. So now jumping into the accessories, and here's everything that comes inside of the box. What we get is the shield, scabbard, Gerbera straight, 2 beam sabers, the beam rifle, and a 1/60th scale figure of Lo himself. I will mention that it cannot stand up because it doesn't have a base, so it's stuck down with a little bit of blue tack. But yeah, that's what's inside of the box. Let's take a look at everything one by one. So when it does come to hands, we don't have anything extra in here besides these hands right here, which were, back when this came out, the de facto standard for perfect grade. So these are those kind of articulated hands. We don't have any set pose ones for holding onto weapons or anything like that. And as for these ones right here, they're holding up fine so far. These kind of hands can be a little bit iffy at times. The bend is pretty good in all of the digits. The only thing that likes to pop off occasionally is the ball joint attaching into the hand, but they're performing okay so far, but I haven't attached anything in. How they perform with weapons, we'll see as time goes on. So next up in here, we've got the pair of beam sabers, which, in usual kind of perfect grade way, are huge and massive and, well, are big enough to be used as poorly performing chopsticks. The handles on these are pretty simplistic, but they do get the job done quite nicely. They've hidden the seam very effectively by putting in a bit of a recess, but overall looking pretty good. The beams are mildly on the vigorous side, and we do have some nice little particles or glitter inside of the blade, which really gives it a kind of nice crackling energy feel. Really, I don't know why they don't do that more often. With beam sabers, it adds an incredibly nice kind of energy or particly kind of effect. That's nice. So in order to get these into the hands, it's kind of a two-step process. First off, you've got to get the little slot section onto the tab in the hand. Now, this is an old school kind of way you would have seen around the turn of the 2010s. These don't hold up too well. You eventually abrade the hole and kind of wear down the peg, and they don't really start to work anymore. The fingers are kind of there for window decoration. They do kind of hold on to the grip a little bit, but overall it is a little bit kind of funny. It will hold on to these weapons. I do recommend that you just kind of decide on your setup and set your kit up permanently that way, because otherwise it's just going to get looser and looser over time. The fingers loosen up as well, but overall it is quite easy to get them attached. The dual grip of the peg and the fingers are holding up for now, and that is what it looks like. So trying to get this into a little bit of a pose and getting one of the weapons into a reverse grip to see if it works out. It does work out, but this does kind of bring me to my first big gripe about this kit, and that is the fact that there is no stand included. Whatever additional price would have been added to the cost of the kit just for a stand would have been worth it. There really isn't anything available out there to grab for this kit in order to pose it. As far as I know, it is compatible with the stand you do get with the strike, the perfect strike, perfect grade, perfect strike, that one, as well as the Sky Grasper, because it is based on the same parts and inner frame as the strike, but there is nothing inside of this box to use with it, so it means it's always stuck on the ground. And the other thing is, the shoulder armor does turn with the arm when you are posing it, but still in the end what you get does look pretty cool. Overall, it's doing pretty good so far. When these are not in use, it's the usual thing. You pop them out of the hands, pop the beams out of the beam saber handles like so, and then these can be stored round back on what are essentially featureless big lumps of ABS that you just kind of stick them into. These are mainly hidden by the backpack, so I guess it doesn't really matter that they don't have much detail in them. It just holds onto them like so. They can move side to side, and that is what they look like from the front when they are attached in. Looking very, very classic Gundam. The next weapon we have in here is this, and that is the beam rifle. Predominantly, this is just in grey plastic, as you're seeing right here. We do have a lens in that same clear green we've seen on the rest of the kit so far. As for what this can do, it has a side-to-side moving handle like this. I will mention that the trigger there, anyway, kind of moving back a little bit to the build. This is a simple enough weapon. It's mainly made out of two big halves and then the additional aspects to it. But inside of this, I did notice that the trigger kind of looks like it has a little bit of a modification where you might actually be able to cut off that little bit up top and add either a bit of a spring or maybe nothing at all, but definitely some kind of springy something to make the trigger actually work. Out of box, it's just stationary, but you might be able to modify this. Overall, it's a simple yet fairly big beam rifle. So when it comes to getting this weapon into the hand, it's exactly the same again. Now, I tried to get this into the hand while it was standing there, and it didn't really work out. There's too much kind of going on, too much leverage and all of that. So I highly recommend when you are attaching this to just remove the hand and then, take care, get into a comfortable position and get it done right. That way you won't be putting too much undue force on any of the aspects of the fingers or anything, because they do feel delicate. They already feel like they're starting to break down a little bit already, so don't do any more than you need to. And having no stand be damned, I decided to get this into a bit of a pose anyway, and I just use my arm as a good old-fashioned stand. It does look nice in a pose. I will mention there are some aspects around the torso and the waist which aren't that great when it comes to articulation. The shoulders rotating with the arms is a little annoying too, but the legs do move very, very nicely, and a lot of the actual main aspects of the arms move nicely too. The biggest issue, of course, being no stand, getting it down the ground like this, it's hard to kind of balance it just right. You'll get it, but it'll take a lot of time. Honestly, I just end up using a fucking Sharpie with some blue tack, so yeah, having no stand is definitely major Bumsville. Also, I did realize at some point it must have shot this at me in some kind of attempt to kill me, but this right here is a kind of like little grenade segment that attaches into this hole right here in the end of the rifle, just like so. But nothing really holds it in, so it can be a little bit of a drop hazard, like basically what just happened to me. When the rifle is not in use, just pop it out of the hand. There's this little section on the side which just folds out ever so simply, and then you just plug this into the hole round back. Now, I will mention this doesn't hold in 100% securely. It's got a little bit of a wiggle to it, but it hasn't fallen off on me. And that is what it looks like from further away, and that is what it looks like from up front. And again, still holding on fine. So next up in here, we've got the shield. Again, in the exact same colors as we would have seen on the Gundam itself. It is just in white round back. We've got a handle which folds out on a C-clip by the looks of things. It can slide up and down just like so. This is the attachment point. Funnily enough, it seems to have a lot of the same mechanisms as the strike. And then we've got this little fold down section right here, which just opens up like so for that window section, which you can see through. Just one more time. That right there is what it is like closed, and then you just press this down and it opens just like that, because I assume the Gundam looks through it. That's actually a pretty funny concept of the Gundam raising its shield and just kind of peeking through the little hole on it. That is actually pretty cool. When it comes to getting the shield attached, it's kind of funny. Once again, it's a weird leftover from the perfect grade strike it is based on. First off, we've got this little segment round back, which you actually have to open up. Now, I'm not sure, I probably have some footage of this, so I'll throw it up. When it comes to the actual strike Gundam, this opened up and clipped through the armor in a cool kind of way, that the armor went back over it for a nice cool double attachment. On this, you kind of flip it around backwards, and then just kind of shove it into the back of the arm. We do have a nice bit of armor that moves out of the way to give you your hole to stick this into. Then you need to kind of just align the handle to get it into the hand. But when this is attached, we do have a weird little kind of sticking out bit round back, which once again is a leftover. This is kind of backwards compared to the way it should have been in the strike. It's just strange. Anyway, when it is attached, it does work well. It is always attached onto the side of the arm like so, so there isn't really any kind of tilt or anything like that to it per se. There is a little bit, but you can't actually get to the point where that little bit of a visor segment is actually lined up with the eyes. It's always kind of just mounted onto the side of the arm like so. But yeah, all of this stuff we just looked at, it doesn't really matter. Nobody's going to use that stuff. What we want to see is this right here, the Gerbera straight katana. So flashing back in time a little bit to the build of this, and this is quite impressive. This is similar to what we would have seen with some of the other kits, but there is some nice details to it. First off, you put the little hilt section together. It is 2 layers, so you've got your inner layer, then your external layer, which looks good. And then you've got your chromed out metallic gold sections that attach on for the guard, as well as the little segment down at the end. The blade itself is very impressive, with one little bit of a down point. That is the fact that it has been chromed out on a runner, as opposed to, well, produced by Bandai then chromed afterwards. So that does mean when you do cut this out, you do end up with some little notches out of the back, which could look a little bit better. You could try and cover these up with a little bit of chrome paint, but it's never ever really going to be perfect. The manual says a lot that the end of it is sharp, so be careful. It's not actually that sharp really, but you do get this funny little rubber bit for popping on top to keep your eyes from being gouged. The detail, like I mentioned, is super impressive. So the tang section of this sword actually slides down into the grip section, and you take this tiny little piece right here and you slide that through the grip, and that actually locks the blade in place and gives a nice little bit of a gold detail to the handle. When it comes to the scabbard, we've got those rubber stickers once again. These go on the inside, so when this goes in and out, it's protected from being scratched, while also kind of holds in place inside of it. Then you just build up the little extra parts on it. I did notice these nub up a little bit more than what we would have seen in the actual mobile suit itself, and overall the assembly is quite simple. Of course, make sure to take the rubber yoke off before you attach it into the scabbard, but this slides in perfectly and feels good on account of the nice rubber part. The one's inside the scabbard though, not the one on the top. And that brings us to right now, and this is what we got. I did pan line it up a little bit in some aspects, not everywhere, and this is absolutely gorgeous. Even though, you know, some of these parts are cut out after being chromed up and there is little nubs here and there that you can see, it still works out very nicely. Now, I do find this little section right here at the end does tend to fall off a little bit too often on me, so maybe be careful of that. But the actual detailing on here is amazing. We do have a bit of a bestial kind of face molded into this. It looks demonic. I'm not sure if it's meant to be a tiger, but it definitely looks demonic. And we've something extremely similar on the guard as well with some horns. Those are really cool. I've seen a few of these kits, but I don't recall ever having seen this much detail molded into the gold parts. However, like I mentioned, this does knob up quite a bit in a lot of places. Removing this from the scabbard is quite simple. It just pops out just like so. I've heard it can be a little bit on the delicate side, so do be careful. The plastic band I uses to chrome is always extremely brittle underneath. We also do have that nice little bit of a pattern for the blade right there. And overall, Bandai have done an incredibly nice job with this. It looks great. Now, if all of that was not impressive enough already, this is this section which mounts it onto the hip, which is incredibly nice. So this just opens up via these two little segments right here. So you just clip it open and then slide it just like so. The scabbard section then just slots in here like that. We've got a little piece of plastic poking out to guide it into position. And then you just bring this up and the whole thing just locks into position just like so. Actually, maybe almost too good, because for me, I found it really hard to get it back off again. So this is incredibly cool. Finally then, once the blade is actually attached on in here, this little section then closes down over the guard to lock it into position. This is nice. This little bit of extra bulk here is nice too. This is probably the nicest attachment point I've seen on any version of the Red Frame to date. So again, this scabbard mounted on may not be perfect, but it might just be the best mounting of a, well, katana and scabbard onto a Gundam, especially a Red Frame, I have ever seen. First off, the side skirt here is not just your standard flat piece or single piece like you'd see on most Astrays. This actually has an opening mechanism where it opens just like so to reveal a little bit of a plug inside of it. Then you plug your scabbard holding system into it, and you've got a bunch of moving parts to kind of get this into the exact position that you want it in, which is very nice. Again, it's not perfect, it can pop off fairly easily, especially from the ball joint inside of the waist, but once you get kind of a hang of moving it, you can get it into whatever position you want to kind of just pose your Red Frame Astray in some really cool samurai-esque poses like this right here. Combining that nice range of movement with some of the more awesome aspects about this kit, like the fact that it does have fully posable hands, does mean you end up with some really cool combinations. I want to get a bit of that kind of samurai sword drawing kind of flair going, and I got that so easily too. Just a little bit of a bend of the legs, get the hands in the right position, bend the fingers into what you want. Again, the fingers are quite delicate, so be careful, and in the end, it does look phenomenal. It's nice to pose, the weapon looks cool, and overall, what can I say? There's just something majestic about the Red Frame. So posing the kit kind of with its hands held around the sword is one thing, like it's not actually holding onto anything. So what's it going to be like when it's actually holding onto it? Anyway, in order to draw the weapon, you lift up this little bit of a clip right here, and it just slides out nicely. It's got a nice little bit of a grip to it due to the fact that you've got those rubber stickers inside of it. That right there is pretty damn nice. Again, chromed out blade, always nice. So at this point, I kind of wanted to get the second frame, if you will, of this particular pose right here of when the sword is drawn. So I just kind of moved the arm to where it would move naturally, attach the sword on in. There is 2 points in which to attach this, so it can be held either fairly far back or, well, a little further closer to the guard. I went with the little further close to the guard position. It attaches on okay. Again, like this kind of grip, it's a little bit on the wonky side, so it can be a little bit touch and go. But in the end, it kind of just all kind of failed because the shoulder is kind of likely to leverage itself out every now and then. It's not the most fluid posing experience out there. It's good, but not great. In the end, this is what I got right here, which is pretty okay. I wish there was a little bit more articulation in the wrist than just a standard ball joint, but overall it does work quite well, and besides some iffiness at the shoulder and the fingers, it's not too bad. So once you got the Gerbera straight in its hands, all you really want to do is get it into some badass samurai-esque poses. Now, all I'll say is, this starts posing so good at first, and then you'll find a couple of little things just keep getting a little bit on the irritating side. The side skirting loves to pop off because there's a whole lot of bulk attached onto a tiny ball joint. The hands don't hold onto the weapon very well, sadly, but things go well, then they go bad. And overall, it can be at times a bit of a miserable posing experience, but what you get in the end is so worth it. Once this is in a pose, it looks furiously cool. I don't know what to say. There, like I've said so many times throughout this review, there's a majesty and awesomeness and excellent, brilliant, fantastic amazement about the red frame, and nothing has done it this well. The amount of bulk, the just way it reflects the light, the various angles and facets on the armor, the detail, the greebles, everything is just so perfect, topped off with an over-the-top chromed out katana, and it looks excellent. This kit is tuned for certain poses and certain poses only, so there isn't a lot of articulation in a lot of sort of different ways. Like, you can't really get much of a spin at the waist, or the arms can't reach up too high, but this isn't a general purpose posing gunpla. This is set to do certain poses, and those poses it absolutely annihilates and looks so killer. It may not be the fanciest perfect grade out there, but I think if you threw this in a cool pose beside all the other perfect grades, most people would say this is the coolest looking one. And another instant 180. So I was trying to do this pose right here. This one, which I just realized is kind of funny because that foot is just outright kind of going where it wants to. But yeah, I was trying to pull this off, and without a stand, it seems like it is impossible. But I did it. I pulled it off absolutely flawlessly, just like it didn't fucking work out at all. It just face planted off the desk onto the ground. Now, this is partially my fault, but mainly Bandai's fault. There should be a stand inside of this box just to pull off kind of poses like that. What I used was this right here. So I had a Sharpie propping it up with blue tack. Now, this was working out fine for the most part, but it just went for it. It just completely dived. It dived and exploded. Nothing looks broken, thankfully, but yeah. Be careful. And Bandai, with perfect grades, include a stand. So I just picked it up off the ground and put it on the table, and it just is fully balanced. Like, I just put it onto its foot, and I don't even know what to say with this kit. I feel like it's just taunting me at this point. It's been standing there like for 5 minutes now. It couldn't even stand in the other pose for 20 seconds. I don't even know. I suppose it's time for the actual articulation. So finally now onto the articulation with this kit right here, and I will mention that when it's not being moved, this is incredibly solid. When it did end up falling on me, it was because I had it in a bit of a funny position, propped by a marker, trying to pull off a straight up lie pose that Bandai says it can do. However, when you are moving around, I find the shoulders and the hips might pop at times, but it doesn't really feel like a kit you should be moving around an awful lot. Anyway, let's get the usual pose tested. So when it does come to the articulation on the perfect grade Gundam Astray red frame, it is fairly basic. Now, you do see some over-the-top poses out of this thing here and there, like in the manual, but these are a little bit over-exaggerated. This has a lot of limitations in a whole lot of places. The hips are limited, the ankles are incredibly limited, the shoulders are limited, the waist is limited, and there is no ab crunch. So overall, it is extremely limited, which is not unusual for a perfect grade. These are more for display rather than play, and they're kind of tuned for specific poses and only fairly basic poses at that. Now, I will mention what really kind of holds this back is the ankles. They're just a simple ball joint, and that is really what you get out of it. There is this kind of nice little moving gimmick right here, which moves as you actually angle this, but is that really worth the loss of articulation? I guess that is up to yourself. Now, I'm not going to go through everything on this, mainly because it is an older kit, but I will take a look at a couple of the interesting aspects. When it does come to the cockpit hatch like we saw in the build, there's a little bit of a slide out mechanism to it. So when this is actually fully built up, you just drop this little lower section of the cockpit hatch, slide out the upper section, which can be a little bit difficult to get a grip on, and then just move it out and click it out like so, and then you can see into your low inside. This kind of moves in a nice way. It kind of clicks nicely into place and back, so it doesn't kind of end up opening on you when you don't want it to. Overall, it works quite well. There is a lot of limited aspects to the articulation, but the limbs definitely aren't it. These bend very, very nicely. Whoa. Anyway, let's try that again. This does bend quite nicely at what I thought was 2 aspects, but this bit does kind of, but not a whole lot. This is what you get, and we do have that nice little flap section in the elbow, but otherwise basic enough for the most part. This part is nice. There's a lot more building to it than what you kind of get out of it in the end though. Moving down to the leg then, and like we saw, we do have this nice little side to side movement action right here. Would have been nice to get a little bit more articulation though. And again, we do have a fairly nice knee bend here with a lot going on, including sliding armor up top. Those bits of armor move ever so nicely as it's moved. The knee moves along as well with some nice pistons. This one right here just being a red one, and there is a silvery one inside there somewhere as well. Where'd it go? Actually, I think I might have just saw a bit of a glint off the bit of diecast in here. There is the only pistons you can really see on the leg right down there. Overall, again, it's okay, but there's an awful lot of building for not really an awful lot of happening. But yeah, once again, there is that test pose. It is limited in a lot of places and not going to be doing too many crazy over-the-top poses. Besides 1 or 2 it's tooled out to do. So anyway, that right there is it for the review, and this to me is a gold tier perfect grade, which kind of makes sense. Gold tier used to be the highest tier on this channel, and this would have been the best of the best back in the day. But right now it does feel a bit middle of the road, and it is in the middle of the road of my ranking system now. It is a very nice kit, but of course it has some aspects which do feel a bit old school. However, considering it is 2009, this is a fantastically awesome kit for that year. And for the most part, it still holds up today. Aesthetically, that's its most powerful feature. It looks fantastic. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's beautiful. Throw on the Gerbera straight, and this thing looks insane. Would have been nice to have a stand, but it still looks incredible on a shelf. And honestly, like I mentioned, line up a bunch of perfect grades on front of anybody, and a lot of people are going to choose this as the nicest looking one. When it comes to the accessories in here, all you get is really what you need. If you ever got the first release, you'll get the 2 swords the way that you want it, but one is still nice because you get to focus on it a little bit more. It's very detailed, nicely designed, and everything in here does what it needs to do. Finally then, when it does come to the articulation, it's pretty good in some aspects, but overall it kind of isn't too crazy. Again, it is a very big kit, so a lot of its kind of oomph and shelf presence just comes from its awesomeness, but it would be nice to get some nice poses out of it too, especially up on a stand, but it seems like you're going to be stuck with it just kind of standing there. But yeah, honestly, at the end of the day, it comes down to, do you think this looks cool? Because if you do, that's the main reason to get it. And it does look cool. Anyway, I got mine through Hobby Link Japan. I'll throw a link down there in the description. As always, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to come back for more Gunpla reviews, and I'll see you next time. I can't end this video right here without the usual thanks, saying thank you so much for watching. This video and this channel would not be possible without each and every single one of you, including those of you who support me over on the channel memberships and on Patreon, including Abraxas, Caleb Engelhart, Go Little Rockstar, Joe, Org59061, Shadow Wolf 179, 10 Soldier YT, and Van Fawn.